between those two people.
Joe's right. I'll just set off to the side. No, Joe's right. I'm not going to let you Joe back.
Great, glad to meet you.
Squeeze in here in the end.
Looks like a Game of Thrones map.
I know.
Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay.
On air. Rolling.
Welcome to the February 23rd Bothell City Council meeting, special meeting. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All council members are present except for Councilmember Agnew, who's absent and excused. We have just one item on the agenda tonight, and that is a training by Ann McFarlane. And I do have a brief statement about Ann McFarlane's. Am I saying that correctly? Is it McFarlane? McFarlane. Ann McFarlane is majored in Russian and Ancient Greek at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She received a Marshall Scholarship awarded by British government and earned a second degree at Cambridge University in England. She then joined the U.S. Foreign Service, serving as a diplomat in Pakistan and on the Soviet desk of the U.S. State Department. After marrying fellow Foreign Service officer Lou McFarlane, Anne became a stay-at-home mom in the Congo, Tanzania, and Kathmandu, Nepal. On returning to Seattle, Anne became a Russian translator and was elected president of the American Translators Association. Since developing Jurassic Parliament in 2000, she trains elected officials, staff, and nonprofit board members across the nation. Anne is a professional registered parliamentarian and a certified association executive. With Andrew Estep, she is the author of Mastering Council Meetings. And with that, I will hand it over to Ann. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. It's a thrill to be here. Robert's Rules of Order and Jurassic Parliament is one of my favorite activities in the entire universe. But if you say to most people, oh, let's go and spend a quiet evening with Robert, you'll really enjoy it. It's about like saying you're going to love your root canal. So thank you all so much for being brave enough to come. So I want to start with a very radical suggestion. I'd like to invite everybody to turn off your cell phones and put them away just for this hour, because your attention is the most valuable thing in this room, and I'm quite greedy. I want all of it. I want all of it for myself. So I have to tell you that I was not born the queen of parliamentary procedure. My parents did not give me a gavel in my childhood and say, Ann, one day you can be a parliamentarian. Like so many of us, I fell into it. When I was elected president of the American Translators Association, I thought, well, I'd better go and learn Robert's Rules of Order. Now, how many of you have seen this book? How many of you have read at least some of this book? How many of you would agree with me that this is a terrible book? To my mind, this is a classic instance of our human tendency to take a good thing and keep on improving it until we wreck it. Robert originally was a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And when he published his pocket manual in 1876, it would fit in your coat pocket. It was a handy little guide to meetings. And somehow, all across the nation, it became the standard. Americans were busy forming associations, and they were thrilled to have a common understanding of how to run their meetings. But I believe that over the years, his son and grandson have allowed it to become far too elaborate, so that I was very tempted to give up. But our bylaws said, like the bylaws of 90% of the voluntary associations in this country, meetings shall be run according to Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, latest edition. So I kept on reading Robert and going to meetings and thinking about it, and eventually I realized that Robert's Rules is a classic example of the Pareto principle. You know that principle, 20% of the people drink 80% of the beer, or 5% of your constituents give you 95% of your problems. So there is a core to Robert that we really need. There is a core that is essential and vital for good and fair and well-run meetings and for our democracy. And since 2000, that's what I've been involved in, trying to extract that core and make it available to people. So many of the things I'm going to say today you're all familiar with, but I hope that you'll find that it will be a valuable way to review and learn a few new things as well. So we are going to be in a role play in the city of Dinopolis. So please find Dinopolis on your map. We always need to know where we are in space and time. And we have some different topics that we're going to cover. Next slide, please. So this is not entirely realistic. It's a fantasy, but there's some overlap with real life. And it's like using broad strokes, using crayons to convey the real picture. So next slide is our workshop method. We're going to have a city council meeting, and you are the council members. And everybody is going to have remarks to make that are printed on this paper. So I'm going to pass these out now, and I do want to ask you, if you would be so kind, do not share your remarks with your neighbor. When you read your remarks here, you'll just keep them to yourself. And you will find inside your packets an agenda for the meeting today. So take a look at that agenda, and we'll call the meeting to order very shortly. You could show that, just don't show the content. Let's see. So if you would take your name tent and put it out in front of you so that we can see who everybody is. And I need somebody who's willing to take 2 roles. I have 2 roles. Can you be the neighborhood blogger as well as the? So you can just put them one on top of another.
Okay.
And then I need a restaurant owner. Would you be the restaurant owner? And I need an administrator. How about you? Would you be the administrator? And then I need a chair of the arts commission. All right, good. So just take a look at those numbers that are there and be alert. So when I call the number, I'm going to ask everybody to stand to say your remarks so everybody can be sure to hear it. So that also helps us get into everything with more enthusiasm. So let's jump ahead. No, let's not leave the slides where they are, if you would, Wendy, and we will take our agenda. So has everybody found the beige-colored agenda? It's in your folder, yeah. And notice that there's a motto. The city motto is listed at the top, so we always begin our meetings by reciting the motto together. And I get to be the mayor, so. This meeting of the Dinopolis City Council is called to order, and we'll begin by reciting our motto. Ready? Serving all our citizens with energy, commitment, and all that mushy stuff. Now, could we have a little enthusiasm, please? Come on. Serving all our citizens with energy, commitment, and all that mushy stuff. So the chair sees that there is a quorum. Brenda Brontosaurus is on vacation, and she will not be attending this meeting. So this is in Dinopolis, they don't always approve minutes, so we're just going to jump right into the action. So our first item of business is the proposal to increase parking fees. So the administrator will give us the staff recommendation, number 1.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is continuing pressure on our parking spaces in the downtown area of the city of Dinopolis. The staff has reviewed the matter carefully. As you know, our current rate is $2 per hour. We recommend that the due fee be set at $20 per hour.
Thank you so much, Mr. Administrator. Does anyone care to move that motion? Number 2.
I move that parking fees be set at $20 per hour.
Thank you. Is there a second? Somebody just second it, please.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that parking fees be set at $20 per hour. Do you care to speak to your motion, Madam Environmentalist?
Well, I'm a believer in public transportation myself. I think that this increase will lessen congestion and also force more people to take buses or walk. It's a good idea for the environment and for our city.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Number 4.
I think this is a terrible idea. This is the elderly member. We've just learned that we have a $10 million surplus. Why would we increase parking fees and burden our residents this way?
Thank you. Number 5.
Do you know that the parking fees in most cities of the league are $15 per hour? We are so far below the market that it's ridiculous.
Number 6.
Well, that's not a crazy reason, but that's not a reason to go crazy and lay this burden on our residents. Many elderly dinosaurs are really feeling the pinch. The improvement in the economic situation hasn't touched them.
Number 7.
There's no point in being a poor mouth and crying sympathy for the down and out. If they had any ounce of gumption, they would have saved up for their old age.
What a hard-hearted comment. You might be old and wrinkled yourself someday. Have you no sympathy?
All I have to say to you about that is balderdash.
Number 9. Number 10.
Point of order. Please, Chief. Point of order. These members are monopolizing this discussion. Under Robert's rules, no one can speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once.
The point is well taken, Mr. Chief of Police. Thank you so much. So, have you ever had a discussion like that in your council meetings or your committee meetings or your commission meetings where two members get into that kind of argument? If you haven't, I think that's wonderful, and I commend you. But unfortunately, many times it happens, and it's a violation of a fundamental principle of Robert that we'll take a couple of slides forward to, the principle of equality. Just keep going. There we go. All members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. This is one of the most basic things that Robert promotes, and that means, next slide please, that discussion in council and committee meetings is not a conversation. It is not a conversation. And we have this very important rule, next slide, which is that no one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. This is absolutely critical. In fact, on the next slide, you'll see we've put it in red because it's so big and so important. No one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. Next slide. This is critical, and applying this rule will transform your meetings, and it's a must if you wish to maximize your effectiveness. So I've often asked myself, why don't we apply it? Next slide. I think the reason is that we often carry on our discussions in a conversational style, a conversational mode. And in conversations, dominant people tend to dominate, and agreeable people tend to let them. So you have to have a structure, and it's both fair and equitable. And this rule will enable you to do that. So when something goes wrong and people are not following that rule, a member can make a point of order. So I would like us now to take the yellow sheet of paper that you have in your folder, and we are just going to practice these little scripts, there are 6 of them, on point of order. So what we're going to do is we're going to pair up. You can pair with the chief of police if you would, and one of you will be the member and one of you will be the chair. And after you've worked through the first page, flip it over and continue and reverse the roles so that each of you has a chance. So all we're doing is reading these through so that we have the language in our heads. So you can be a chair.
Chair, I raise to a
Chair?
point of order.
Either way.
Okay.
My esteemed colleague has used the term
Chair, I rise to a
cream-faced
point of order.
in referring to the
My
mayor of
esteemed
Fernville.
colleague has
According to
used the
Robert's
term
rules,
cream-faced
insults are not
loser
allowed
in
in
referring to the mayor of Fernville. According to Robert's rules, insults are not allowed in debate.
The point is well taken. Members will refrain
Are
from
you-
using improper language.
Okay. Chair, I rise to a point of order.
I think she suggested
You
just
announced the motion that I
flip on
made
the other
and
side.
called for the
Chair,
vote
I
right away.
rise to a point
We
of
have
order.
to have discussion on this motion before we
You
decide
announced the
whether
motion that I made and then called for the vote right away.
You have the right to speak first, so member C.
Point is well taken. The mayor
to a point of order. Sam Stegosaurus
Chair, I
has
rise
spoken
to a
3
point of
times
order.
already, but other members are waiting.
Sam Stegosaurus has spoken 3 times already, but other members are waiting to speak.
Point is well taken. Would you like to speak?
Point is well taken. Point of order, Chair. Are you ready to vote on the motion?
Point of order, Chair. The amendment.
We voted to.
The point is well taken. Are you ready to vote on the motion as amended?
Chair, I rise
The
to
point is
a
well
point
taken.
of order.
Members will refrain from making personal attacks.
My
on their
colleague
colleagues
has
or
called me
anyone else.
bozo. It is improper to use such personal insults during.
The point is well taken. Members will refrain from making personal attacks on their
Point is well
colleagues
taken.
or
Our meeting will continue. The next item of business is
Point of order, Chair.
state your point.
You have declared the meeting adjourned, but we still have business to discuss. The chair of the meeting doesn't have the power to adjourn the meeting like that.
The point is well taken. Our meeting will continue. The next item of business
you
is
get into like amending motions and main motions and how they
No, we didn't discuss that at all. When the request was for point of order and,
Oh, okay.
and for that side of the thing, so I didn't plan anything on motions as such.
Because I know these guys haven't had a lot of training on
Uh-huh,
made motions and many motions.
yeah, well, I'd love to do it another time, or,
Okay.
or also, we're gonna have webinars on it as well.
Oh, okay.
So, but that wasn't, I didn't understand that to be what was asked for today. Sorry. Okay, so do you have any questions based on those little scripts? So you're welcome to keep them. You're welcome to keep them just as samples of the kinds of things that can come up. Now, of course, in all of these, the chair ruled that the point was well taken. Later, we'll have an example of what happens when the chair rules that it's not well taken. Okay, so now let's resume our discussion on the parking fees. So whoever has number 11.
Over here. I'm not very happy about this, but I think it's true that our fees are quite low.
Does that mean that you speak in favor of the motion, Madam Gardner? Number 12.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. So under Robert's rules, if you have a motion, members are supposed to be clear whether they're speaking for or against. Next slide.
How did I get that up? Ah, here we go. Next slide.
So this is just a rule of Robert. When a motion is being discussed, members must either speak for it, speak against it, or ask a question. So we're going to have any further discussion. Number 13.
I move to amend the motion by striking the words $20 and inserting the words 10 cents.
So the chair is going to rule that this proposed amendment may not be taken up because it's dilatory. Next slide. Dilatory means time wasting, and it's one of the duties of the chair to protect the members from time wasting motions. So if somebody says something that's patently ridiculous, that wouldn't even cover our costs, that goes below where we are now, the chair doesn't have to waste anybody's time with it. We're not going to take it up. Further discussion. Yes?
So, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here. With this motion and the earlier comment that there was a surplus, maybe the maker of the motion wants to use they want to bring it down to this and use the surplus to offset the costs.
Well, that would be one of the things, again, as I mentioned, we're sketching the broad picture here. We're not going into great refinements. Perhaps the maker does have that idea, but then that motion would have been that we lower it to 10 cents and use the surplus to offset the costs. As written,
Okay.
he's just saying 10 cents, which would not cover the costs.
Okay.
So, but thank you for that point.
I have another question.
Yes,
So then
uh-huh.
that invests a lot of authority in the mayor to decide whether something is time wasting or not.
Absolutely, it does, and we'll talk later about what you can do if you disagree.
Okay, so there is an appeal process for
Yes,
that.
yes, but we haven't got there yet. One of the things about Robert is, it's all kind of interwoven, so as we go along, I think some things will become clear. So let's have further discussion on the motion, number 14.
This
rest
is
not
likely
voted.
to put a crimp on the vitality of our downtown. As a business owner, I'm really concerned about this. I speak against the motion.
Thank you. Further discussion, number 15.
I see those arguments, but I think we have to be prudent. I guess on balance, I'm in favor of the proposal.
Thank you. Further discussion.
So if we do this, the residents are likely to come and throw eggs at our houses, and I'm dead against it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Friendly Member. The chair would like to point out that the city of Dinopolis has not raised its parking fees in 25 years. So in her view, given this lapse of time, it would be appropriate to raise the parking fees as recommended.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes?
The
state your
person
point.
running the meeting is not supposed to take part in debate.
Well, actually, the point is not well taken. Next slide. So in large assemblies, when you have a huge group of people, the chair may not participate in debate. The exception is if the chair feels strongly about something, she can step down and have the vice chair preside so that she's free to speak in debate. But, next slide, Robert has special rules for small boards, which are considered to be up to about 12 people. And in a small board, unless the bylaws or the regulations say otherwise, the chair may take part in discussion, may make motions, and may vote. Now, obviously, when it's a strong mayor, you're going to be governed by the RCWs. When you have a mayor who's a member of the council, the mayor has that right. So it's perfectly fine for the mayor to make her comments. Is there any further discussion on the parking fees? So hearing none, we'll take the vote. The motion is that parking fees be set at $20 per hour. Now, I want you, if you would, to vote in favor of motions right now for demonstration purposes. Later, you can be as obnoxious as you like. So all those in favor of raising the parking fees to $20, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
Oh, no.
just asked you all to vote in favor.
Oh, you did?
For my
I was
demonstration.
trying to stay on script.
Yeah, well, he said against it, it's true. All right, so let's do it again. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it, the motion passes, and the parking fees are set at $20 per hour. Now, I would like to just briefly run through a little piece about the authority of the chair and the members. Next slide, please. Let's see, should we do this first? Okay, so let's, before we do that, let's tackle this piece. How do you achieve the goal that we talked about? That no one can speak a second time till everyone who wants to do so has spoken once? The key thing is, members must seek recognition from the chair. And seeking recognition means that you put up your hand, and the chair keeps track of who has spoken and who wishes to speak. The chair can also empower the vice chair to speak, which is to keep track, which is great practice for him or for her. So next slide. So when you say you must seek recognition, next slide, you raise your hand and you wait to speak until the chair gives you the nod or looks at you or says your name, gives you some other sign that you have the floor. Next slide. Don't do what the doctors at Swedish would always tend to do when I was working with them. They'd say, Madam Chair, I'd like to say that. Let me mention that. They'd raise their hand as they spoke. You can't do that. It doesn't count. Next slide, please. You speak to the chair, and it's a kind of sonar. Everything pings back and forth between the chair and the members. And you don't speak to each other, which seems odd and unduly formal. But it actually has a very beneficial effect, because if people speak to each other, it's very easy to slide into that kind of conversation that we had an example of earlier, where you're talking to each other and you're talking about things and not the proposal, and you end up hijacking the meeting. So you don't want to do that. All right, now let's look at the role and the authority of the chair and the members. And I know some of you have seen this piece of information before. So one kind of organization, next slide, which is very common and well known, is an accountability hierarchy in which you have, it's shaped like a triangle, and you have the boss at the top. And the boss is in charge. The boss recruits people to do the work of the organization, tells them how to do it, and if they do it badly, fires them. So leaving aside our current realm, leaving the municipal realm aside, could somebody give me an example of an accountability hierarchy? Don't think too hard.
Baseball team.
Baseball team, excellent. How about another example?
A contractor's company.
A contractor's company? How about another example? McDonald's. In fact, most corporations are built like that. Most corporations, with a very few cooperative type exceptions, have at the top a boss who's in charge. How about the military? We don't have the grunts on the ground telling the general how to run the campaign. The general is in charge. In fact, this structure is very common. And it's so common that we kind of think of it as the standard or default structure of organizations. And one feature, next slide, is that it has rank or status. And the people who are near the top are higher in status than the people who are down below. And that's not in and of itself a bad thing. It's necessary if we're going to have accountability. We hope that the people near the top use their status intelligently and listen to the other people, but it's okay, in my view, that they have that status. Now, to this type of organization, I want to contrast a voluntary association. Next slide. In a voluntary association, a group of people come together to achieve a common purpose. They set up some guidelines for themselves and they select a leader. But the leader is a peer. The leader is an equal. The leader has the same status as everyone else. Next slide. So the leader has to do the job by persuasion and by convincing people, and not by giving direct orders. It's a very, very different model and a very, very different type of authority. And one of the biggest problems that we find is in Jurassic Parliament is this kind of scenario. Someone will have a fine business in his small town, and he'll be doing a great job selling cars or with a string of laundromats, and he's on the Rotary, he's on the Chamber of Commerce, and then he gets elected mayor, and he's surprised when he can't fire the city council members that he doesn't like, because he misunderstands the nature of his authority. And this is just an absolute key point, that the chair, the mayor in your council, the chair of the planning commission, anybody in that setting is a servant who, during the meetings, is on the same level as everybody else. Next slide, please. So when you get selected, you have 3 different types of duties, and each one requires different skills. Managing or administering does require giving orders, and it requires attending to details, and it requires a lot of very specific skills, which I'm sure you all have, because you wouldn't have chosen a life in public service if you were a complete free spirit who never knows what day of the week it is. It's not compatible with the lives that you are living. The second task is to lead the association, which is very different, because leadership requires creating an emotional bond between yourself and the others, and inspiring people to do more than they might do on their own. And then the third task is presiding at meetings. And running meetings is yet again different and requires some elements of control and some of letting go. Next slide. So the key point is that during meetings, the chair controls the process so the group can make the decisions. The chair controls the process so the group can make the decisions. And next point, next slide. The presider is the servant of the group, and the group is the final authority. The presider is the servant of the group, and the group is the final authority. So we'll talk about how that plays out as we go along. So now we're going to look at what members can do when the rules are not followed. Next slide, please. Oops, no, let's do this too. This is important. What is each person's, I shuffled them around. I'm sorry if I'm jumping a bit. So what is each person's individual authority? Each of you, elected members of this council, how much authority as an individual do you have? Anybody want to make a guess?
Equal authority with everyone else.
Okay, but just as an individual. So I'm looking for a slightly different answer, actually.
By yourself, none.
What's that? None.
That's right.
There, you got it. Next. 0. You have no authority. As an individual, you have nothing.
Sorry, we've got a wireless.
There's a great quote. Next slide. What is each person's individual authority? I love this. It's not from Robert. It's from the other authority that's most commonly used, the standard code. All members of a governing board share in a joint and collective authority which exists and can be exercised only when the group is in session. And I think that is a brilliant statement of the fact that your authority is joint and collective. It's not individual. And you all know that, but I think sometimes it's helpful to review it. So now, next slide, let's look at what members can do when things go wrong. We're going to have 2 different examples. One is going to be when the chair is passive, something's being done wrong and she's not doing anything, and one is when the chair herself misbehaves. So I encourage you to let loose on these remarks that you have. Don't hold back. So our next item of business is the motion to censure the past HR director. Does anyone care to make that motion? No. Passed. I think it's the burnt out member. Is it the burnt out member, numbers 18?
Oh, okay.
Could you stand, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that since our past HR director threw herself a going-away party that included $900 worth of gourmet cupcakes, paid for by our city, this body should approve a motion to censure for her extravagance.
Thank you. Is there a second? Very well. It's been moved and seconded that the past HR director be censured for her extravagance. Do you care to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is so clear that no discussion should be needed. We've never had a tradition of elaborate going-away parties for our employees, and this was completely over the top. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Number 20.
I think you're just saying that because you're jealous of her popularity. After all, everybody was happy to come to the party and eat those cupcakes.
21.
You should talk. I've heard rumors that you used to date the past HR director, so you shouldn't be making those kinds of accusations of me.
Point of order.
Okay, so the chair is sitting here and she's not doing anything. And what are these members doing? They're doing all sorts of things that are wrong.
These members are not following our rules for discussion and decorum. They are failing to seek recognition. They are speaking to each other instead of the chair, and they are making personal remarks.
The point is well taken. Members will refrain from these improper actions. So let's look a little bit more closely at point of order. Next slide. So when another member breaks one of the rules, a member may make a point of order. Next slide. It's a motion claiming that a mistake has been made. When you say point of order, you're saying somebody has done something wrong. A mistake has been made. According to Robert, it can only be made by a member, although we recommend authorizing the staff to make points of order as well, because sometimes, particularly our clerks, know the rules better than the rest of us, and so having them have that power can be helpful. And you may interrupt a speaker if necessary. You may actually interrupt for point of order. And the key point is it must be made timely. It has got to be made timely. A point of order must be made before the next item of business is taken up. If you fail to do that, you're considered to have waived your right to object. Now, obviously, if the council took a vote that was completely wrong, your attorney is going to come around and straighten it out, later. I mean, there are things you can do. I'm only speaking from a parliamentary point of view, from a Robert's Rules point of view. There are other considerations as well, which will take precedence. But according to Robert, it's got to be made timely. So if you wait, it will be too late. There are a few exceptions, but they are very rare. Next slide. Notice that the chair does not say point of order. The chair doesn't need to, because the chair has the duty of ensuring that order is maintained. So the chair simply has to take the appropriate action. And this is just for those of you who've had the training before where we use the dinosaurs. Next slide. A point of order is a flying dinosaur. It doesn't have any rank. It just comes up and you deal with it right away. All right, so let's continue now with our discussion about the HR director. Number 24.
I went to that party and saw a bunch of cupcakes, but I thought the HR director made them herself. All we usually have is a few peanuts and some punch at our parties.
Thank you. Further discussion, 25.
Why are we considering a motion to censor? It will just make us look bad to the public, as if we don't have our own house in order. I'm against this motion.
Thank you. Further discussion, 26.
If we don't do anything, it will seem as if we didn't care about theft of public money. I think we have to take action here.
Number 27.
I would like to know what the chair thinks about this motion. Is she in favor of a motion to censure?
I think that we are well rid of that floozy, and the less said about it, the better. She did a lot of harm in the press to us, and you people haven't given the staff a raise in 10 years, so it's just going to look awful when it all comes out.
Why are we getting so
Wait,
upset?
wait, wait, 28.
Oh, you're 28. I thought you were 28.
Oh, I'm sorry. Special instruction. Oh, point of order. These remarks are completely contrary to Robert's rules. The chair is attacking the council member.
Oh, well, the chair apologizes for her error. So next slide. No, I'm sorry, back Wendy, if you would. Back. When the chair breaks one of the rules, a member may make a point of order challenging the chair's action. And the chair actually has to rule on it, which is kind of odd, but that's the way it goes. So the chair offended, and the member raised a point of order, and the chair gave her ruling. The point is well taken. So let's have some further discussion. Number 29.
Why are we getting so upset about a lousy $900? It's not even in four figures. It's just a drop in the bucket for our city budget.
The chair has never heard of such a self-serving remark. Here we are, a city council elected to serve the probity of our citizens, and somebody is saying that self-interested, careless, indifferent kind of thing. I'm just shocked, shocked, shocked that such a thing is going on.
Point of order, Madam Chair. The chair may not speak in that way. According to the Roberts rules, the chair must maintain a neutral attitude and use calm language.
Oh, well, the point is well taken. Next slide, please. So the chair may not get all emotional. The chair has a duty to maintain a calm, steady demeanor and be fair to all, no matter how deeply she feels about the issues. Further discussion, number 31.
Well, I have to say, when I was at the party, I definitely had the impression that the HR director was the person who baked the fancy cupcakes.
You know, that's just repeating what was said earlier. I wish members would be quiet unless they have something new to add to the discussion. It's just no point wasting people's time.
Point of order, Madam Chair. The chair has no right to make such a statement. Members are free to speak and debate as they choose.
Oh, very well. The chair apologizes. So next slide. The chair has a duty to ensure a fair process, but the chair may not attempt to direct the content of the member's speeches. The only exception is if that content is not germane. And this, is, by the way, is a real-life example. Somebody really did say that to a colleague. All right, further discussion. Number 33.
In my opinion, a motion to censure is just a waste of time. We ought to make the HR director pay back the money. That would be a much more effective approach to take.
The chair will point out that the HR director has moved to Mexico and is living under an assumed name, so there's no point trying to do that.
Point of order. Robert's rule says that the chair does not have the right to interrupt a member even when she knows more about the subject than the member does.
Oh, really? Where does it say that? Where in Robert's
It
rules?
says it here on page 44, Madam Chair, and for someone who's supposed to be such an expert on parliamentary procedure, I would have thought that you knew that. What's the good of all that Robert's Rules stuff if you can't even follow simple requirements like that?
That is enough. I will not accept these attacks on my integrity. The enemy of the mayor can leave the room. Get out of here right now. Leave the chambers.
Point of order, Madam Chair. The chair doesn't have the right to order a member to leave the room. Only the body itself can do that.
Oh, very well. Does any member care to move that the enemy of the mayor be directed to leave the room?
So moved.
So it's not going to happen like that in real life. But it's a very important point, and this also comes from real life. A city that I worked with had a case where the mayor directed one of the council members to leave, and there was a lot of hoo-ha as a result, because that is not within the chair's prerogative. Only the body can direct a member to leave the room. Now, if you have a member who's not following the rules and is consistently breaking them, that is one of the things you can do. You can direct that person to leave the room. Consult your attorney before you do it, please. All right, so let's look at our next couple of PowerPoints. This one here, and this is true, the chair may, I love it that it's right there in Robert, the chair may not interrupt a speaker just because she knows more about the subject than the speaker does, and the only exception is when the rules are being broken. And the next slide, the chair.
I have a question on that.
Sure, so the chair may not throw a member out of the room. Yes.
So in terms of interrupting, what happens if someone is talking and talking and talking and talking and others feel that they've talked too long?
Well, that's a whole different issue to do with your own rules for discussion. And you have, and I'll digress a little bit here, it's not in the slides, but I think it's a valuable question. Robert says that the basic rule is that members may speak twice on each subject for up to 10 minutes at a time, each. Now, I think that's ridiculous. I think that's a 19th century vision, you know, and not something that we want to have in our councils. So we recommend that councils adopt their own limits, their own time limits, and something like 5 minutes, 3 minutes, I mean something. And if you have them, then you're much better able to cope with those questions of people speaking on too long. If you don't have such a rule, and if a member speaks too long, there's nothing you can do. You don't have the right to say, I don't want to listen to you. You know, that's an offense that would not be allowable. So you want to think of Robert as being like the foundation. And on that foundation, you build the house that you're going to live in. And the house that you're going to live in is crafted by your own rules of order, the RCW, and whatever special rules of order you might choose to adopt. Kenmore has an excellent set of city council discussion guidelines, which they crafted in response to an extremely difficult council member who kept on doing things that made them say, okay, you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do the other thing. But if you want to look at one, it's a good example, I think. Now, also, Robert says that a small board, up to about 12, can be more informal. And so some people might say, well, those limits don't apply, but it doesn't specifically say that. And I think we need limits. I think in this troubled times where we all have lots of opinions, we need to have some limits. Okay, so we had that the chair may not interrupt the speaker, the chair may not throw the member out of the room. So if there's no further discussion, we'll take the vote. Now on this one, you can vote your conscience. So all those who agree with the motion that the past HR director should be censured, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
Oh, she's free as a bird. This has happened in Yakima, by the way, and it was the past HR director, but it was only $700 worth of cupcakes. So our next item of business is the motion to pay legal expenses for Councilmember Brenda Brontosaurus. Does anyone care to move this motion, number 38?
I move that inasmuch as a lawsuit has been brought against Councilmember Brenda Brontosaurus in connection with her official postings on the City of Dinopolis blog, the city will recover all her legal expenses.
Thank you. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that the city will cover the legal expenses of Brenda Brontosaurus in her lawsuit in connection with the blog. Do you care to speak to your motion, Mr. Friendly Member?
Yes, well, Brenda is a good friend of mine, and I think that it's just the right thing to do, and I hope that all the other members will agree.
Thank you. Further discussion? Number 40.
I have to say that in my opinion, Brenda is just a big dope. She is so stupid that her remarks make us look like a laughingstock.
41.
Point of order. Personal remarks and insults are not allowed under Robert's Rules of Order.
The point is well taken. Members will refrain from such improper comments. 42.
I'm concerned about keeping a bright line between council member remarks as individuals and their official capacity. I'm against paying these legal expenses for somebody who is cognitively challenged.
43.
Point of order. The words cognitively challenged are an insult.
So the chair rules that the point is not well taken. The point is not well taken. The words are not insulting, and they may be used.
Appeal.
Okay, so now we come to the great moment. This is, I think, the heart of democracy. This is critical. When a member disagrees with the chair's ruling or decision, any two members can appeal that decision. So let's have the next slide. It's the most important motion in all of Robert's rules, I believe, and the least known. Next slide. So the chair enforces order and decorum. The group is the final authority. Any ruling of the chair can be appealed, with one exception. If the ruling is a matter of fact on which there cannot be two interpretations, for instance, this is what it says in the bylaws, then the motion cannot be appealed. Next slide. So the chair has to be very careful in explaining the vote to the members, because the question that's being voted on is, shall the decision of the chair be upheld? I've made a ruling. I've said cognitively challenged is fine. So the question is, if you agree with me, you're going to vote yes. If you disagree, you're going to vote no. And it takes a negative vote in the majority to overturn the decision. A tie vote would sustain the chair. So you can actually vote your conscience. And fortunately for us, appeals pertaining to language and decorum cannot be debated. Some appeals can be, but if it pertains to language and decorum, is this an insult or not? We can't argue about whether it's an insult, which I think is a great thing. So vote your conscience. So all those in favor?
Just real quick.
Ah.
Does the mayor vote on an appeal?
Yeah, yeah. So does are the words cognitively challenged perfectly acceptable, as the mayor has said? All those who believe so, please say aye. Aye. All those who believe that it's not, please say no.
No.
Very well. The ruling of the chair is overturned, and members may not use this term. So this is just critical, and this is really, really essential for the way that things work. And in order to demonstrate it even better, I need 7 volunteers to come up here to the front. So I'd like all the council members and one other person to come right up here. So we have 7 cards here, and your assignment is to speak to each other and get in the correct order. So the first person in this sequence will be over here, and the last person in the sequence will be over there. So you can talk to each other about it.
So these all relate to one?
This is the sequence of an appeal. Yeah, so just talk to each other and figure out who's first and who's last and who goes in the middle.
appeal? Who's the appealer?
Any member may appeal, presiding.
Okay, so you're, come over here.
He's actually not the first, it's the sequence that goes, so actually, you're the first guy. Group established is what we got. Yeah, so you come over here, over here.
So group establishes rules, any member may appeal a rule, if another member seconds an appeal, group
You're
decides.
gonna go down towards the end, yes,
Legitimate, does that
yes,
mean
you're
like
second, thank you.
factual? Does that mean factual orders of the presiding?
You're the next guy. It's all right, it's hard, it's hard. Okay, so you're in the middle,
Oh,
yeah. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so we've got it in the right sequence here, let's take it, what's the first one?
Group establishes its rules.
Now, have you all adopted Robert's rules?
Yes.
Okay, so you've got your rules. Now, even if you haven't, the courts have found that common parliamentary law applies. So even if you haven't formally adopted Robert, you still can't do whatever you like. But Robert is the most common formula of the common parliamentary law, so it's very handy that you've done that.
In attending the members except for rules.
So when you get elected or appointed, you are bound by those rules. You don't get to say, oh, I didn't choose them. You can ask to change them. But as long as you are a member under common parliamentary law, you must accept the rules.
Presider applies rules for benefit of the group.
Well, it's handy that it's you. So the presider is like a benevolent dictator. No, it's like a benevolent dictator. You're taking the rules the group chose, and you're making sure that everybody follows them. And that's your job, which of course we don't like to do, but it is your job. Then,
all members must obey legitimate orders of the presider.
now that is a key sentence there, and I worked with one city down in the Columbia that had this in their formula. All persons present at a meeting must obey the mayor's orders. Go pick up my laundry and get me a latte on the way. I mean, you know, they've changed it since, but legitimate is the key word there. It's orders that are correct according to Robert's rules and that pertain to the role, not personal orders. Then,
Any member may appeal presider's ruling.
so the ruling is made, any member may appeal,
If another member seconds appeal, group decides.
so it takes two,
Presider, presider obeys group's decision.
The presider obeys the group's decision. So do you see, it's the absolute opposite of that pyramid. That is one vision in which the boss is in charge. This is the other in which the group is the final authority. And somehow we don't know it. We've lost that understanding. But it's critical, in our view, to democracy. These two, point of order and appeal, are the heart of our democracy. So thank you so much. That's great. So we can go back to our seats now. And we'll see the next slide, which is the flow of authority. So that's the sequence. You see the points there, and then the next slide. Ending up with the presiding officer obeying the group's decision. All right, so now let's talk about the right kind of control. Next slide. So the chair must control the meeting discussion. This is absolutely critical. The chair must control the meeting discussion. The chair serves as a benevolent dictator, enforcing the rules that the group has chosen. Next slide. And we don't like this, you see, because the modern style is completely opposite. We're all told to use I statements and to be indirect and to not be confrontational. And you have to forget all that when you're running a meeting. Next slide. It's a balancing act. You want to speak clearly and definitely. You want to not say I, you say your chair or the mayor or the presider or your president. But at the same time, you have to keep an emotional connection with the members, because otherwise you're going to come across as too cold. So next slide, you're looking at a kind of brisk, warm neutrality. You want to be businesslike and focused and keep things moving, but at the same time showing humanity and humor when appropriate. Next slide. So John Neffinger and Matthew Kohut have written this wonderful book, Compelling People, where they talk about the two vectors of strength and warmth. They maintain that when we first meet somebody, next slide, we evaluate them on two different dimensions. One is how strong are they? How capable? How are they going to be able to get what they want done in the world and therefore to get what I want done? The other dimension is how warm are they? Do they care about people? Are they empathetic? Are they caring and connected? And to a certain extent, the two vectors are in a hydraulic relationship. So the stronger you appear, the more likely you are to appear cold. And the warmer and more loving you appear, the more likely you are to appear weak. So an effective leader manages to balance both. And it's a perfect description, to my mind, of what a leader needs to do under Robert's rules. Because if you come across like a tin pot dictator, you're going to lose the group. But if you don't enforce the rules, you won't get the job done. So it's a very, very useful concept to my mind. And next slide. I just want to give you a few quotes from Robert. This is straight out of Robert's rules. It is the duty of the presiding officer to enforce the rules relating to debate and those relating to order and decorum within the assembly. So that's your job. And next slide. This was that line from that Washington City. All persons present at a meeting must obey the mayor's orders. Next slide. No, no, no. And then next slide. It's the legitimate orders of the presiding officer. So next slide. The chair must control the discussion. If someone speaks up without being recognized, stop them. If someone speaks to another member instead of to the chair, stop them. If someone speaks out of turn, stop them. If someone makes obnoxious remarks, stop them. You have to do it, and you have to be willing to interrupt people in order to carry out this duty. So I'd just like to mention, why do we need these rules? What's the point? Well, in our view, in Jurassic Parliament, the most important factor in group decision-making is whether people are giving their own independent individual opinion. But many times we don't, because we're intimidated or frightened or nervous, and we keep back what we really think, whereas it's very clear from a lot of research that groupthink and social cohesion will damp down your options and limit the choices that you're going to make for the city of Bothell. And you can have group genius instead of group think if you really hear from everybody and if everybody is truly free to express their opinion. So I just want to mention a few references, historical references here. You know, in the next slide, in the Roman Senate, the oldest person always spoke first. And in fact, the word Senate is related to senility. It means old. It means old person. But in St. Benedict's rule for monasteries, which he wrote in the 6th century and which is still in use today, he said, God sometimes gives wisdom to the younger monks. God sometimes gives wisdom to the younger monks. He insisted that younger monks had to have a voice. And in my view, diversity is not a frill. Diversity is not a nice thing. Diversity is essential for good decision making. If we have to hear from everybody in our constituency and in our membership if we're going to make the right kind of decisions. And on the U.S. Supreme Court, the youngest justice speaks first. They also have that sequence. And William Buckley, who is not a saint, I think, had a very good line, though. He said once, I would rather be governed by the first 20 people in the Cambridge, Massachusetts telephone directory than by the trustees of Harvard University. Why did he say that? Because the trustees of Harvard University are all one kind of person, and they all think one kind of way. And when you have the chance for real diversity, you get better decisions. So I just wanted to mention those things as, you know, what's the point? Why are we talking about all this? Well, I think that's the reason. So our next item of business is the report of the Arts Commission. The chair of the Arts Commission has the floor.
I have number 45, is that right?
That is us, yes.
Okay. So, thank you, Madam Mayor. The Arts Commission has spent its last 6 meetings reviewing access to the arts for all our residents. We have found that there is a shocking lack of musical training available for dinosaurs. We therefore recommend that the council purchase 20 guitars and offer free guitar lessons to the community center for interested residents.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Number 46.
Oh, I think that's a great idea. I love the Beatles the most of all the popular singers. This way our residents can sing She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah with guitar accompaniment.
Thank you. Further discussion? Number 47.
Madam Mayor, this seems like a very unfortunate recommendation to me. Dinosaurs have claws, not fingers. They won't be able to strum the strings of guitars. We would just be wasting our money.
Further discussion? 48.
I agree. I move that we do not accept the recommendation of the Arts Commission.
So the member is reminded that under Robert's Rules of Order, a negative motion is not allowed. You cannot have a motion not to accept something. 49.
Okay. I move that we send the recommendation back to the committee and ask them to choose a musical instrument more suitable for dinosaurs, like harmonicas.
Thank you, Madam Harmonica Manufacturer. So at this late hour, we're not going to pursue this line of thought, but I just wanted to point out, which you all know perfectly well, next slide please, that a committee is a body that has been appointed to do a job given by somebody else. And this can be a challenge. A lot of times our committees and commissions get the bit between their teeth and they feel like they're the ones who are responsible for their subject. They are up to a point. And a lot of things can go wrong when committees fail to understand the nature of their delegated authority. And we actually have a paper on that, on committees, which I'd be glad to send to Laura and she can share with you if you all might like to have it. We don't have any planning commissioners here tonight, but it's still worth knowing about. So let's look at the next slide, and we'll take, if we have time, we'll take some Q's and A's. Next slide. So these are some of our ideas for structuring effective discussion. Set the outcome and the time when you adopt the agenda. On your agenda, you can say estimated 20 minutes, estimated 10 minutes, estimated 30 minutes. And it's a very good thing to say not policies, but the council will consider a policy on X. Put a verb into your agenda items to the extent that you can, because it helps people stay focused. It's good to have time limits for speakers. Follow the principle of equality. Members should call a point of order for remarks that are not germane or relevant, but when in doubt, the group can decide about germaneness. When we talked about earlier, the appeal, speakers should be clear whether they are for or against, and most important, be ruthless in keeping on topic. It is not allowed under Robert's rules to make remarks that are not germane, not relevant to the subject. And if you think somebody is just rambling off, you can say, in my view, those views are not germane. And the chair rules on that, or the chair can turn to the group and have the group decide. But it's really, really important. I want to just quickly show the 6 different types of unacceptable remarks, and I have them, they're on one of your handouts as well. This is a list that we compiled. In Robert, all these are scattered, and we pulled them together, and we think that they're really helpful to know. So personal remarks are not allowed. You're only saying that because you're an attorney. You're only saying that because you're a blonde. No personal remarks are allowed under Robert. Discourteous remarks, insulting language and attacks are never allowed. Inflammatory language. I was in your neighboring city once when a council member said, there might have been embezzlement going on. And that was not allowed because embezzlement is an inflammatory word. If you think there's embezzlement, go to talk to the prosecuting attorney, but don't just throw it around in a hypothetical in council debate. So inflammatory language is not allowed. Referring to another member's motives, except for conflict of interest. I think the reason that you picked Fossil Lake for our resort is that you're in love with the manager. Absolutely not allowed. You cannot say that. I have a lot of trouble with students on that point. They're always saying, the reason that she got appointed to that committee is, you may not criticize past actions of the group. You may not criticize during a meeting past actions of the group, with 2 exceptions. If the whole group is discussing it, that's fine. You can explain why it's a bad idea. Or if you plan to introduce a motion to amend or rescind it, to change it or to revoke it at the end of your speech, that's fine. But I was working with this town up north, and the mayor had to have it at the end of each meeting of explaining to the council members what stupid remarks they had just made, what stupid decisions they had just made. He was very unhappy to learn that he wasn't allowed to do that. And I like to feel that that may have played some small part in his decision not to run again. Who knows, but parliamentary procedure can have good results. So you have a blue sheet there, and let's just quickly fill in these discussion rules. If you take a pen, and we'll take the next slide. So we're just going to kind of race through them because our time is almost up. But seek recognition before speaking. Seek recognition before speaking. Speak to the chair, not to another member. No one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. One subject at a time. Robert is very linear. You see his military background there. No interrupting except for special circumstances. You must speak for or against a motion or ask a question. And courtesy and respect are essential at all times. When people are upset and angry or frightened, they can't think straight. So courtesy is just critical, and it must be enforced by the chair and by the members. Let's flip it over and look at what the chair must and must not do.
Comments must be.
Germane, must be relevant. Doesn't mean German. It's relevant. So the chair must control the discussion. The chair must recognize members. The chair must interrupt a member who breaks the rules. The chair must be fair at all times. And the chair must remain calm. Ivar's words are with us forever. Keep calm. You absolutely have to do that when you're the chair. And if you can't do it, say, without objection, let's take a 5-minute recess so you can get your breath back. The chair must not participate too much in the debate. The chair must not try to control the content of the debate. The chair must not get all emotional. Must not interrupt a speaker because he knows more than the speaker about the subject. Must not throw a member out of the room. So the central paradox, next slide please, is that the presider, the chair, is the most important person in the room and the least important. It's a very odd role, really, because you're very important in some respects and not important at all in others. And the presider must be strict on process, a benevolent dictator, but the presider is not responsible for the decision that the group makes. Who is responsible? The group. The group is responsible. And I'd want to point out, next slide, that the clash of opinions is vital to council discussion. The fact that you all have differing opinions is a strength. It's a very good thing. It's not a weakness. But sometimes we tend to get identified personally with our opinions, and that can be a mistake because, next slide, at the end of the day, the council must unite behind its decision. It's an ancient principle of democracy that the decision of the majority is the decision of the body as a whole, and the minority must make it their decision as well. Now, I agree with Winston Churchill, who said democracy is a terrible system of government, the worst in the world, with the exception of all those others that have been tried from time to time. You know, I mean, it's a terrible system. If they just listened to me, it would be much better. But it's better than any alternative. It's better than what we have. And there's a wonderful quote from Cornell Clayton at Wazoo. Next slide. The willingness to engage in honest debate and lose on issues you care deeply about reaffirms your commitment to common citizenship. So that's what I hope for you all in the city of Bothell. So we did not have time to go over the pink sheets unless you want any extra time, but it's 7, so it's up to you all. We have these little pink sheets, examples of unacceptable remarks. Yes?
Just love to jump in a couple questions.
Yes, great.
So you had made a statement that when we are speaking, that we should speak in favor or against. We have a process where if an item is coming before us, we first have the opportunity to ask questions of staff.
That's great.
And then that's shut down, and then we go to more of a discussion time, and out of respect to each member, we usually don't like a motion to be passed until there's some discussion. Once discussion is complete, then we make a motion.
That's fine. That's an excellent process.
Okay.
Robert allows discussion without a motion in small boards. It's perfectly fine under Robert for you all to discuss something before you take up a formal motion, and I think it's often very wise. Often you want to kind of explore it before you've got a specific proposal.
So then my question is, when it's in the motion timeframe, once you speak to the motion, any one of us, we should say whether we're for or against it. Because
Yes.
at that point, we don't allow for questions to be asked.
Yes.
So to speak means to state your position.
Yes, that
Okay.
sounds good.
Great, thank
Sounds
you.
very good. Other questions?
I thought in that same slide, you also said that in discussing the motion, you either give your opinion or you ask questions. And I was wondering, do you mean, is that an opportunity to ask clarifying questions of other council members? Ask clarifying questions of staff?
Well, if you all have a process that says that you don't allow questions during the formal debate, then that wouldn't apply.
Okay.
Again, I'm giving you the parliamentary process. Under parliamentary procedure, that's a motion called point of information, which is terribly confusing because it sounds like it means you're explaining something, but it's actually a request for information. And they've renamed it now. This is one instance where the parliamentary procedure people have actually modernized a tiny bit. They call it request for information. So under Robert, if you want to know something that's relevant and timely, you can say a request for information and ask that question. But your process will supersede that. Yeah, further questions? So as an exercise for yourself, you can take this pink sheet, some of which are real-life examples, I must tell you, from neighboring venues, and write down, if you were the chair, what you would say in response to these different points that people made. And you can use that sheet, which is on the back of the beige paper. It lists the 6 types of unacceptable remarks. That can give you some guidance. Because I found that there's 2 issues. One is people say something outrageous. First, you have to kind of recognize it and label it. You know, they say something crazy and you think, you have to be able to identify it and say that's a personal attack, that's referring to motives, that's criticizing a past action. It takes, you know, it's kind of mental alertness to be able to do that. Then you have to have the words on your tongue to be able to respond. Say, point of order, that's not allowed, because oftentimes the debate just keeps going and then it's too late. So this pink sheet is just an attempt for you to practice. And there's one in it which is a slightly trick question. If you look at member C, you know, can somebody read me what member C says?
I think the mayor made a mistake.
Yeah.
When she called the vote.
Yeah, so what's wrong with that?
You're speaking to another member rather than to the chair.
Or
No,
speaking,
no.
it's not a motive, it's,
Nope, nope. I think I'd like to raise a point of order about the vote we took on censuring the HR director.
questioning in the action that you just
That's
took.
it? No,
Questioning in action
no,
you just
no,
took.
no. Point of order must be made timely. Point of order must be made timely. You have to do it before the next item of business. So you can't come back during announcements and remarks for the good of the order and say, oops, I think she made a mistake. It's too late. So you all have been a wonderful group, and I would like to encourage anybody who's interested to think of signing up for the Jurassic Parliament newsletter. Some of you are subscribers, I know. Yeah, do you enjoy it? We try to keep it short and interesting. Now, if you don't want to subscribe, you won't hurt my feelings, because everybody has too many emails coming in. But we do also have blog postings, which are kind of like a miniature course in parliamentary procedure. The next newsletter article is going to be on what to do when the chair is a bully, when the chair is not paying attention. So that'll be useful to you. And in your folders, you've got a little business card, and it has a cheat sheet for the chair inside. I also am always happy to take questions. If you ever have any questions or concerns about parliamentary procedure, please don't hesitate to be in touch. We have a new feature now on our website where you can book a 15-minute phone call for free at a time that's convenient to you. You can just look at my schedule and book it for yourselves. So I've got copies of our book for those of you who would like it, and thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Is there anything else good of the order? Anybody wants to make a motion to
Move to adjourn.
adjourn? Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
You want to call for the negative? All those in favor say aye.